Alrighty, welcome back to another game devlog. This is number 48. 4 more weeks, and it's officially 1 year since I started this project. And well, I've done a lot of systems work for 6 months. This last couple months, I've been actually doing the first production level, and this is how far I've gotten week after week. One more week, I've gotten another good chunk done. A lot of good stuff. So this is the whole level so far laid out in its entire scope. It's quite large. It's the first section. Last week, I was working on this section down here, the basement floor. All I had to do was finish up this last room here for the basement, small room, and I just added a bunch of stuff like I usually do. Finished up the final sector, and it was time to move on to the next scene. This scene's relatively small, so my next job was to move on to the next scene, but in order to do that, I kind of wanted to change it up because these first two scenes are kind of, the floors and the walls are kind of getting too repetitive for my taste. I kind of wanted to really, keep it fresh. So I did some digging and I was able to get like one or two more packs of asset packs to kind of expand my asset library of different walls and floors, and not just use the same floor for the whole level. So on Monday, I took the time to go through those asset packs and really organize and make nice prefabs in order for like modular layout convenience. So make sure the pivots all in the right place and they're all in good order, so I can actually use the G-Spawn tool to actually lay them out. So I made some new floors, and this is going to be the new wall. I pretty much the same mesh dimensions, but it just has a new texture that I can use. And so I started in on the next scene here, and basically it's this hallway with the staircase. I did a rough layout. I didn't do if I was going to do it in order, I would have done this hallway first. But my original plan was like this whole. Let me turn off the rest of this so you can see. Here we go. So in the layout, I planned for this whole section right here to be one sector, but eventually I changed my mind, well, on down the road to actually, even though this doesn't have a gate or a door, I figured that it'd better to have this section as a sector and this little hallway as one sector, and then there's more sectors. So this is the next scene, and I looked at the rest of the scenes, and actually my very first scene was actually the largest. So the rest of the scenes are only about 70% as large. So not as long as I thought to actually finish up the rest of these scenes for the level. Plus, I'm getting mighty efficient in the process of doing this, but I always want to push myself not to fall in the trap of making the whole level kind of look the same, but really, just throw a lot of paint at the wall and really get creative from this original design. Follow the specification of the main layout, but really just, really just get creative as much as possible, and so the design doesn't stay fresh. So I like these new floors. I can really mix it up. I got a nice new concrete tile, new wall, and a bunch of these, and they all kind of follow a systematic dimension system where I was doing a 1x1 and a 5x5. That was very basic, but the more I work with these gray box layout tiles, It seemed more like a system of like a 1x1, a 2x2, and a 4x4 were all that you need. In some cases, for larger areas, I have 8x8, but pretty much it doubles, right? 1 to 2 to 4 to 8. 5 being an odd number, it kind of throws a monkey wrench into all the kind of things. So I think this new system really, it's just a lot more streamlined. And you can only learn this by experience by doing this level construction over and over again. So yeah, so more hallways, more small rooms. But when I got to this part, the end of the day on day one, I really kind of wanted to really kick it up to the next level. You can see the final product here, and it is something pretty nice. I wouldn't say this took me too long, but this right here, this goes to show that it's not just I really kind of stepped out of the box for this one of what I've been doing before. The first couple scenes, sure, but this is what I'm talking about when it comes to like experience and like a level construction. You just get better where you can really challenge yourself, be like, okay, we're gonna try something new for this one, and we're gonna do what we can. So, by the end of the first day, this was all very rough. I I expanded my G-Spawn tools to where I could lay out these tiles, and it'd actually give you a setting where you could say, okay, set this tile, but set it at a random height, right? Originally, like, I could have just said, okay, we're like we've always done before, we're all gonna set the floor tiles to 0. But here I just stamped out these big 8x8 sections and just kind of let the chips fall where they may. Like if it's stamped at this level, okay, kept that. And then these one would be really high, this would be really low. And I kept them where they were. And this is important because it kind of, instead of me sitting here and be like, oh, this one's going to be a little higher, this one's going to be lower, it kind of, that random verticality, throwing the paint at the wall. So initially it was just this big, first day, I should take pictures, but it was just this big rough mess of like floors that are not all in one level. But I went with it and I made it work. So day 2, I continued my my efforts here, and I continued just going in and polishing and putting in railings, making like I usually do, working on the floors, the whole process, and kind of neglecting this first area. I really got into this area and kind of with my new library and my new floor tiles, really it has a whole different look. Yeah, day 2, I just put more work and polish to to get everything, make sure all the colliders are working, all these new prefabs, all the usual work I do, creating a sector. So along the way, I decided to have a little fun with this level. Like at first I was like, the whole level is underground and there's a roof, but I said, hey, why not? Let's or this level's in a space station, it's all interior, but I said, you know what? I'm going to go for it and say this part of the level is exterior, right? It's open to the sky, and let's try to actually employ our rain effect now and see how that goes. So I'll give a little short demo after this, but pretty much I got the rain effect working. In fact, I'll actually I'll show it right now. Okay, so this is what it looks like here. With the rain effect, I had to go in and kind of fine tune the rain to kind of So you can see the splash is a little bit clearer. And one of the interesting things I did was I didn't want to spread this particle effect across the entire scene. So what I did, because this is a large scene, and what I did was I kind of made this grid system with the help of AI that kind of like it uses these box colliders, and if you go in between them, it kind of disables ones over here and enables ones over here. So you pretty much localize the particle effect to wherever you move around the scene. This makes it so that you're seeing the rain, but it's not enabled for the whole sector. Um, I'll talk about this a little later, but this is kind of the idea that I was playing with in the back of my mind. But as it's like this would work for optimization for this particle effect. It's not until later that I actually would want to use this in a different way. But anyways, we have our nice rain effect. And when I was working with this, I was like, okay, you got your rain, you got your splatters on the floor, looks great. Um, well, usually with rain, things look wet, right? When you have liquid on the ground, right? So I was like, it doesn't really quite look right with the rain unless it just started raining. But it's just like if this is outdoor and it's been raining for a while, we need everything to kind of have like this darkened, you know, really specular look, right? Especially with the tiles. So I think I can actually turn it off and on so you can see. But yeah, here we go. This is what it looks like without wetness. It doesn't look quite right. Get the rain, that's fine. It sort of pass, and if you look closely, also, if I zoom in here, as far as the character goes as well, um, you know, nothing too special here. But if we enable the wetness, all of a sudden you can see this specularity. It looks like she's wet. So, this really sells this really sells it. So, and it also coats pretty much every surface in the um, every game object. So it gives this really glossy, specular look. And thankfully, this shader, this decal shader, was already made. I didn't have to go on and make a shader, so this works perfectly fine. This here, I extended over the entire surface of the scene, so that worked out pretty good. And then so later I think this actually looks pretty good. There's a package I was looking at where you could actually, if it's really glossy like a pool reflection, you could actually add reflections of the character. I'm not, I think this actually passes unless it was like a pool of water or something. Like you're not gonna really need too many like surface reflections, but maybe that I can get that later. Um, so kind of back to my grid tile system. Um, it kind of localizes and optimizes. Okay, the rain's only in this area. Um, so that was on Wednesday. On Thursday, I was able to finalize the the room. I also did something interesting with just a little kind of experimental kind of thing here, where like I have this little area here where you can the camera's pointed at an angle, but you can actually see in a lower part where it's like, okay, you got this satellite dish here, and maybe like um, just add a light back there. It kind of gives you kind of a sense that there's something below here, and the rest I kind of just blacked out. But it's just like kind of it's a real precursor to more of this, more stuff that I want to do with this particular camera angle in future levels to kind of take advantage of this real estate here, not just wall, but like exposed, and then beyond it, you can actually see, vistas of other things later on. So, uh, I was able to On Thursday, get the final details and polish for everything. You know, really tested the heck out of everything. Um, Doing what I can. There's a couple situations where I had to apply alpha walls to these little areas, but I think it worked out good. It's interesting that you can't really apply decals to transparent surfaces, so I kind of had to fake it with a just increasing the smoothness, so it pretty much blends in with the other walls. You know, you won't really even really notice. I also have these turrets here. They're kind of a spotlight. A lot of these things you can actually, I guess in modeling they call it, it's basically mashing two assets together to make one. It's pretty much like a, you know, a spotlight and as a light, but then I put a turret on it from like one of my spaceship prefabs, and now it's a turret light. So this will scan back and forth, and if you get spotted, it'll start shooting at you. So a lot of different things. Um, I went through and applied per the specification and kind of went through the different routes you can travel through this big room and kind of put cover obstacles in certain places according to the patrol paths. So basic level prototyping, talking about, you know, here's your enemies and here's their routes through, like how you will avoid them, like going through this level, things like that. Um, so on Thursday, I kind of got the idea, like after doing the, because this room, again, I was running the same problem as I did with the last scene. You have this big scene, a lot of lights, a lot of shadows, and you're getting this Unity warning again, like URP cannot process the number of shadows, blah, blah, blah. You know, I gave it a band-aid fix for the last scene, but this one I'm going to have to address the issue. Oh, excuse me. So the problem comes in when you have these large scenes, a lot of lights, a lot of shadows. My previous prototyping solution, it worked on the basis of, you know, if you are, you know, away from a sector, it'll disable the shadows. As soon as you cross a sector, it'll disable the shadows. This works if the sectors are relatively small, but if you have a big sector, it's still going to have, you know, you're going to have intersector shadows, too many shadows at the, you know, live at once, where, you know, it's so big that, you know, you're over here, but there's shadows over here. You don't really want that. So I had to come up with a new solution, and I think what I just did with this rain grid solution was pretty much the ticket for that kind of optimization. Something that, you know, instead of disabling and enabling shadows per sector while crossing portals, it'll actually control the lights directly depending on where you are within the sector, where you are within the entire scene, pretty much. So I had to kind of go and do some engineering work to kind of abstract the logic out of this weather rain system and make it better. And let's see, let's go take this out of here. And what we have now, we have this sort of system here on the scene manager where we can go and say, we can specify the tile width and height, and we can create all these tiles, and it'll actually delete anything that doesn't cover. It takes the floor into account. So like if a tile covers the floor, it'll create this. So basically you're going between these different sections, and then so I spent pretty much Friday working on this new system to actually get a handle on the lights and shadows optimization in the same thing I did for the rain system. And this is basically, at the end of Friday, I had it working where if you would cross a section, I'm not sure why it's not working. Let me see if I can get it working for demonstration purposes. There we go, I got it working. So basically, if you see the character here, you're moving around, and what you'll do, the green line, if you cross it, it'll it will enable or disable depending on where you are. I made a special case and exception since the camera is angled in a certain way. Um, you want to see if I can. Oh yeah, here you go. This one. Since the camera is angled, you can see more of this area, and I had to make the sectors large enough so where you cross the line, you're not going to see shadow or lights turn on and off. I was able to get that working, but yeah, it's working on a grid system. You can see that all the green areas here is the kind of the area. So the foreground is, or the front facing the camera is the more important, but still you want to have enough to where if you cross this line, it will. So now, even though this section is somewhat large, it's still only isolated and controlled to the area where the camera and the player is. Everything else, since the lights are off, the shadows will not be rendered as well. So I don't have to worry about turning off and on lights depending on if the player crosses into the sector, because it really didn't work for the case with these large sectors. Now I have tighter control over which lights are being shown at any one time. So, and this tool here allows me to click a button and blanket the area and the scope of the scene with these tiles. And I think this is a much better solution going forward. It took some engineering work, took some doing, a lot of testing, a lot of trial error, blood, sweat, and tears, but this is pretty much a system I think will be good for light and shadow optimization. I'll have to go back and apply it to the previous scenes, but right now this is what I'm going to be using. So I'll have to refactor the existing light and shadow control logic, but this is what we're going to be going with. So a little bit of engineering work after that on Friday. So next week I will go back to this very first sector here and finish up the detail work. I actually was able to hook up this staircase for the sector transition like before, so you can actually go down and up floors via this staircase. But I have to finish up this one and polish up with the details and everything like I usually do. But that is pretty much what I did this week. I think I really stepped it up here, and I think it looks I think adding this verticality. I had some verticality in the previous rooms with the catwalk, but I think this really here adds a lot of dynamics to the level of the game. Like, so this is kind of how I'm going to proceed with like larger rooms. It's not going to, having an all flat surface area, that's kind of, it works sometimes, but you kind of want to break it up so you can't just run across the whole room. You have to kind of, it's still an open area, but there's multiple paths to the exit over here. So pat myself on the back, say I'm getting a little better at being creative and building levels, but it's a continual process. By the time I get through the whole game, like I said, I'll be a pro at level creativity and design, and I'll have to look at my very first attempts and really go back and rework it to something that meets the standard of what I've come to know. So that's about it. I think that's all I have to say for this week. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.